my dad was killed when I was 3. We had no money and life was difficult. Everything that's gone wrong is because my dad was killed and whatever. He said, you can have that choice, or you can aim to be an inspiring leader. And if you're not inspiring enough now, as you've told us, learn from others and your father and people who've been good leaders, men and women, and pass it on, pay it forward.
Hi, I'm Devon Harris. Welcome to Keep On Pushing TV, where we share ideas and insights that are going to challenge and inspire you to keep on pushing and in the process, live your absolute best life. Hey, you haven't done so yet? Please subscribe and hey, leave us a like as well below with a comment because it helps us to grow the channel and would really appreciate your help. My guest today, Jonathan Bowman-Perks. He was influenced by his father's heroic leadership role modeling and his untimely death as a British Royal Navy fast jet pilot. Jonathan's life's calling is to inspire others to find and live their true north, unlock their potential, and make a real difference in the world. He's a retired military officer, a motivational speaker, top 5 podcaster, author, coach, and mentor. And yes, he's an inspiring leader. Enjoy.
This is Keep On Pushing TV with Devon Harris.
Jonathan, welcome to Keep On Pushing.
Thank you so much, Devon. It's a great honor, and I'm a great fan of yours. So to be on your show, you've made my day. Thank you.
Well, my friend, as they say, flattery will get you nowhere. But I know you. I did mention in my introduction of you that you're also host of a podcast, Inspiring Leadership. Jonathan, tell me how would you define leadership, and who is an inspiring leader?
Yeah, it's a really good one. I mean, many books, as you know, Devon, have been written on this topic to fill a number of libraries. But the couple of definitions that I love of leadership, it's encouraging people to do what you want them to do because they want to do it. And then the other one that I like is creating the conditions for success and removing the obstacles from the team and the people you lead so they can achieve it. Mm-hmm. And then you asked me about inspiring leadership, which is the book I've written, the psychometric I've done, and a lot of research over the last, I suppose the last 40 years, what makes inspiring leaders and what does it mean? It's sort of to breathe life into yourself, to inspire, inspiritus from Latin, to inspire energy in you. So you inspire others in your team and colleagues. So they willingly give discretionary life energy. They choose to their clients, to other people, and to the community to make a difference. So that's what it means to me.
Yeah, so you're breathing life not only into yourself, but into the people under your charge, in your charge.
Yeah, and they influence others by being inspiring themselves. So people, they don't have to sell, people buy them because they're inspiring.
Yeah, I love that. They don't have to sell because people are buying them just because of who they are.
Yeah.
So I know, Jonathan, that you yourself was inspired to become an inspiring leader by a man who was not physically in your own life, but one who nonetheless had a tremendous influence on you. Would you like to tell us about him a bit?
Yeah, so I think you're implying my father. And you asked me to bring something, didn't you? You said bring something. So my father was a fast jet pilot in the Fleet Air Arm in the British Navy. And this is his hat. And as they say, if the cap fits, wear it. And actually, it does fit me. It was left over of when he was killed. And I also brought another item which would amuse you all. Here we are. This is his dress sword. You'll remember all this from your daily Santos, my friend. And I keep this hanging on my wall, not to fight off attackers, though I'm sure I could run them through if they decided to attack my wife, myself, but just as a lovely memory of my father. And would it be worth me just saying a bit of a story of why I'm doing what I'm doing because of him.
Absolutely, yes. We want to know.
Yeah. So I suppose it goes back to when I was 3, and memories of that time are very blurred. Maybe I was told this story and I've embedded it in my head, but I seem to imagine myself in a caravan on a windy, wet Scottish airfield, and there's this knock on the door of the caravan, and my mother opens the door, and I'm peering from behind her skirt, and there's this really smart naval officer in his full dress uniform, and he says, "Ma'am, I'm sorry to tell you, but your husband, Lieutenant Commander Paul Heath Perks, has been killed flying on board HMS Victorious, and we're trying to find his body at the moment." And from that moment, everything in our life changed. You know, my mother was 35. She had 3 young boys. I was 3. My other brother was 7. My other brother was 9. Everything changed. We were no longer guests of the Navy, albeit living in a caravan wasn't particularly grand because we hadn't had much money in those days. You didn't get an army quarter if you married too young. And so everything changed from that time. Small Navy pension, and I went on with life and went to school and things like that. We scraped by. We got a bit of help from other relations who were very kind to us. And then I sort of thought I'd go into the armed forces like my father had, but I don't know, I got seasick and I didn't want to fly planes. So I thought I'd read Captain Commando and things like this, little boys magazines. And I wanted to be a hero like my dad had been. So went to the army, and I did really well to begin with. I got outstanding reports. To the point where I was sent to Top Gun School, which was where you went, the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, one of the finest leadership training centers in the world. And I thought I was the bee's knees, the dog's bollocks. I was really pleased with myself. Big mistake, real arrogance. And I got my first annual report. And I sort of, looking back now, I knew I wasn't a very good instructor. I was trying to be too strong, too aggressive. I had a huge 6'4" guardsman of a color sergeant who was a bully, and I thought I should be strong on my team, and if they weren't good enough, get them out, fire them, that kind of stuff, drive them hard. And I got an average report. I like, what like, I'm not average? But of course, compared to the others, I was average. They were much better. They were better inspiring leaders. I was not an inspiring leader at all. Moment of crisis in my life, not good enough. Would I get fired? From this great job? And so I wrote to the Fleet Air Arm Officers Association. Anybody knew Commander Paul Perks killed 1960?
So if I could jump in there, Jonathan. So you are assessed as just being average, and you are really, as the word used, is crisis. But we also know that crisis suggests danger or opportunity. And there are a lot of people, when they're dealing with crisis, kind of throw their hands up in the air and yield, I guess, to the danger, succumb to the danger. But you're getting ready to tell us that you didn't succumb to the danger.
That's a really good insight. No, I could have rolled over and just averaged, bumped along. But I'd always remember my mother said my father didn't do average. He never did average. He always tried to do the best he could do. Be yourself, only better was one of his mottos. And don't die with the music still in you. If you've got something in you, pass it on, pay it forward. My mother was a big philanthropist, and that's been passed on to me, helping other people. And as you learned when we were at Sandhurst, the motto "Serve to Lead" was all about it. This doing good, sending the lift back down. If you're lucky and you've succeeded, send the lift back down to help others. And I know you do an amazing job in the charity work that you do, helping others because you've been fortunate. So yeah, that was probably, that stoical philosophy is really, and a Christian philosophy as well, is the two things that have inspired me not to be a victim, but to keep on pushing.
Right. I love that you just mentioned. So I do want to hear about how you embraced that crisis and moved on to become an inspiring leader. But let's go back a little bit before that, because it's kind of interesting. So I get to Sandhurst, and it was a world away from the world I knew. I grew up in a place called Olympic Gardens, which is not as fun place as the name suggests. It's really a rough ghetto environment. And here I am, one day I'm in the middle of Olympic Gardens, the next day I'm at the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst. and it couldn't have been two divergently different and starkly different places. Um, and I know that after your father was killed, your family went, and Don was spiraled financially, as you just mentioned. Um, and so this is not something that I would have thought of when I was at Sandhurst, that there may be a British cadet who is perhaps just as poor as I was. How did you fit into the Sandhurst world as someone who was called Stone Age Perks?
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting. You see, so I went away to boarding school, even though my mum didn't have any money. One of the relations paid for me to go to boarding school because there was no father figure. They thought it would give me a father figure. Little were they to know, luckily not in my house, but in another house, there was a paedophile who was abusing the boys in that house. So boarding school wasn't a great thing. Luckily, it didn't happen to me, but I feel so very sorry for those who went through that abuse. And as you do charity work, my wife and I help people who've been through abuse. And that was stuck in my mind. But so I was at this boarding school with very rich kids, like the rich kids who were at Sandhurst, but I was the poorest there. And so I had second, third, fourth hand blazers and socks and, holes in the sleeves with leather patches over them. And so they said all my clothes came from the Stone Age. And so they teased me and called me Stone Age Perks. And it really hurt, actually, because my mum tried her best to scrape together stuff to get me to this place. But then there were the extra things I couldn't afford. Same at Sandhurst. You come across, as you experience, the British class system: upper class, middle class, and lower class. And although in theory we were middle class, we were incredibly poor middle class. And often people get carried away with where they are, what the class is. The great thing about my mum was that she had this belief in inclusion and diversity. So we had people of all walks who came and had lunch with us on Sunday. We didn't know who they were. She just picked them up on the streets. They had no food. And she said, come and have lunch with us. And so I wasn't one to judge people. But I noticed that, and as a mutual friend, Errol Stewart, he and I became best friends. And Errol was, like you, in the Jamaican Defense Force. And also Himalaya Tapa and Anwar, who was from Jordan, and also Jeffrey Bostock, who was from Barbados. And I probably were more friends with the overseas students, who actually were a bit, at times, ignored by some of the British guys because they were all competing for which regiments they were going to be in. But for me, it was character, and it was people who had integrity and values, and, as we discussed, true north. And so I've made lifelong friends. I've made friends with the other guys, the British guys too, and I've stayed in touch, Rod Thomas and people like that. But Errol and I, that went really deep.
Yeah, really interesting. So at Sandhurst, the motto "Serve to Lead" is those three words have been my kind of my watchwords ever since I marched up the grand entrance. And we spoke about how your dad influenced you to become an inspiring leader, but it seems to me that your mom was incredibly influential as well, because in her right, she was a servant leader. You just mentioned that you didn't have much, but she would always find people, invite them over for lunch. So she was serving. How do you see it? How do you think she influenced you?
Yeah, thank you for that, Devon. I mean, really a lot, in that she was really strong about not being judgmental about people. To have good judgment, but don't be judgmental about people. You don't know, you haven't walked a mile in their shoes. And she said, do you know their life story? No. Well, she taught me to ask people what their story was. And only when you know someone's story can you really understand where they're coming from and what motivates them. And I find I use that in my coaching now to find out people's life stories. And it's incredibly powerful. And this thing about serving others and helping out with charities and doing things where, was it that famous comment, plant trees under whose shade you will never sit, to do things that will be good in a few years' time, maybe not during your time. And the story of the starfish, where you see the person throwing the starfish back in the sea, and you say, why are you doing that? There's thousands of starfish dying. You say, well, I made a difference to that one. And she was a big believer in making a difference to that one. And I've kept that principle ever since.
Indeed. Yeah, it's talk about serving and connecting with a higher purpose, which If more of us could do that, even if we're not in leadership position, because we're all leaders in our own right, the world would be a better place for sure. So, wow, Stone Age Perks, no longer a guest of the Royal Navy, and for all intents and purposes, we're having a good life until the moment your dad got killed, being an inspiring leader himself. It seems to me that you had a lot of reasons to be bitter and to feel like a victim, because fate had dealt you a really terrible blow.
Mm.
How come you weren't a victim, man? What's going
Yeah.
on?
Well, firstly, my mother, who was the philanthropist, that she thought she was going to be Admiral Sir Paul and Lady Perk. She imagined she was going to be an admiral's wife and knighted and that kind of stuff, because he was one of the most talented pilots in the Navy. That wasn't to be, but she believed in me. And she said, when I yawned, which I always have a habit of yawning, she'd say, Jonathan, generals don't yawn. So she was already thinking of me as if I was going to be a general. So she had ambitions for me. There's always a danger there of parents, their unmet needs of parents living their lives through their children. So that
Yes.
creates psychological problems. But when I was at Santos and I had this moment of crisis, average, not doing well, I reached out and I asked for people who knew my father to write to me. I got 30 letters from all over the world, and 5 of them were near the Royal Military Academy, Santos. So the officers' mess. I invited them to come. I was an instructor there, have lunch with me. And we're
Well,
having,
can I correct you? I knew of the officers' mess. I
you
walked
never
by
went
it.
in
I was not officer yet.
it. That's very true. Yeah, I had to go back as an instructor before I got in there. I never got in as a cadet. That's true.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'd get frightened of it. But we're having this lovely lunch. Bit of wine had been drunk, and people relaxed. And the guy sitting opposite me, like where you're sitting, Devon, said, "Jonathan, your father bought my ticket." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Your father was test flying all the Buccaneer aircraft. They were brand new. We knew they had faults. He was the best pilot as commanding officer, and he was test flying them before we flew them. And on the 6th airplane, which was mine, I was due to fly it. He flew it. It had the fault. He died. I should have died. He should be having lunch with you here today, and I should be dead." I said, "How long have you been carrying that?" And he said, 30 years. I said, "Look, for what it's worth, his son releases you from any obligation. That's what leaders do. They take risks. They take the bullet on behalf of their people. But in business, people don't do that so much. They often dodge it and let somebody else take it. But actually, the leaders should stand up and should take it front on behalf of their team, or have the umbrella to keep the shit off other people and look after
Yeah.
it's coming down from up." And then the guy to my right was Commander Bill White, and he said, "Jonathan, I was his co-pilot. He got me out. And like in the film Top Gun with Goose, your father was killed because the ejector seat sent him into the tailpiece, and he was washed up 2 days later, and I identified him." He said, "But I lived on. So you got a choice here." And this is the big word, choice. He said, "You have a choice. You can be a victim. Poor me. My dad was killed when I was 3. We had no money and life was difficult. Everything that's gone wrong is because my dad was killed and whatever." He said, "You can have that choice, or you can aim to be an inspiring leader. And if you're not inspiring enough now, as you've told us, learn from others and your father and people who've been good leaders, men and women, and pass it on, pay it forward to others," which is why you're doing your podcast, to pay it forward to others. And so am I. It's to what people have taught me, and I'm desperate to learn. I soak it up like a sponge. I'm dyslexic. I've written 3 books.
Right.
I do it, audiobooks, but I listen to about 80 audiobooks a year. I'm just soaking it up to pass on the latest knowledge. Like you love keeping fresh. I know you do.
Indeed. So, Jonathan, serve to lead, leading from the front. That's what we're trained to do at Sandhurst, right? The officer is always out front, and must be willing to take that bullet, as you just mentioned. And the first time I heard the term moral leadership, moral courage, was at Sandhurst as well. And you alluded to the fact that while we're trained to do that, and I think we do a really good job of that in the military, of being out front and either holding up the umbrella to take the crap off, keep the crap off, or taking the bullet. it's not a practice that is widely seen in the civilian world, I would argue. And I know you're also a coach. So how do you coach? How do you advise? What tips do you have for leaders and would-be inspiring leaders to, you know, uh, help them get to that point where they are the ones taking the moral bullet for their team?
Yeah. It is a really, it's a thing that's drilled into us and taken for granted after a year to 2 years training in the military. And, you know, they would have spent, I don't know, £750,000, £500,000 on training and developing us throughout our military careers. And in business, if they spend $25,000 on training you, they think that's a lot of money. And they expect you to sort of learn on the job without any training, which is crazy if you think about it. Oh, just sort of learn as you go along. Well, from who? You know, from a psychopathic boss or from an inadequate boss. And you can learn how not to do things, but learning how to do it. And this is where the moral compass comes in. You know, imagine that everybody's watching you when you're doing something. And I think there's been times when, and I'll perhaps tell you in a later story about when I felt like giving up. And just like, oh, I was tired, and they were all tired. But as the leader, everybody looks to you and they go, what do we do, boss? And you go, crikey, it's like, it's me. I've got to make a decision here. Well, you can gather some views and ideas, and then you've got to make a decision and you've got to see it through. And your personal example is everything. People don't, I remember the sort of Nancy Klein as a teacher, she was told by her headmistress, and she's a very good coach to me. She's in her 70s now, an American lady. Her headmaster said to her, Nancy, remember, the kids are learning you, not what you say, they're learning how you're behaving. So it's about character, it's about personal example, and you can't fake that. People smell a rat a mile off.
Man, you know, people are buying you, as you said earlier, right? You talk about personal example, which is, you know, I'm just kind of going back to Sandhurst, and that's what was drilled in us, I think. And there was a certain amount of pride in owning up to the mistakes of the team and your own mistakes. There was a certain amount of pride in knowing that you're putting yourself out there. But what I found in the civilian world is that there's a really thick dose of CYA, cover your ass. Um, and they not have the benefit of, you know, standards education or military training. And so again, I go back to, you know, how do we help people get past that, to develop that character, you know, as they come up through the ranks in their respective companies?
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think this this I versus we is, you know, something that doesn't come easy to people. They've fought for themselves, and particularly if they're in like an investment banking or something, they can be, you know, bonuses, just individual rewards. You get what you reward. And of course, in a military system, they reward the team and the team output. And I remember dragging Anwar, who kept telling me he was going to die because he was bouncing up and down on the same spot, wasn't moving forward. He only got the vertical movement, not the horizontal.
Right.
And I said, you're not dying, and we're going to make it across the line, because our team result the time doesn't end until everybody crosses the line, including you. So that you're as strong as the weakest link. So you've got to get a team through it. Whereas in many individual-based organizations, you know, people just look after themselves. And they've got to think of, and this is where COVID-19 and communities and things there's the good side of it been about caring for the community and others, and appreciating health workers and delivery drivers who are doing things for them, but they're not the clever ones at the top of the organization, but they're making a huge difference to the organization. So valuing everybody and what they do, I think it's brought it home.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. Valuing everyone. So let's go back to RMA Sandhurst. So you know, you slaved away. Which company were you in at Sandhurst, by the way?
Gosh, right. I think I
Can
began
you
in
remember?
Normandy Company, SM
Booyah!
25, Normandy Company, yeah.
Yeah, I was in Normandy too.
Yeah, we had, and we had in Alamein, I think we had King Abdullah.
Ah,
Jordan,
right.
he was in the other company. Yeah.
It's an interesting place. You get to meet some really interesting characters for sure.
Yeah.
Um, so you got beasted through SMC, a standard military course for our non-Sandhurst listeners. And you become an officer and you go off to your regiment. You were signals?
Yeah, I began the first 10 years in the Royal Signals, did electronic warfare. I did the airborne course and got my red beret. Got beaten. I definitely got beasted there with the paras. God, that was
Yeah,
tough. That was
yeah,
really tough. Yeah.
yeah.
And I was scared of heights. I mean, I only did the para course because I was dared by a friend of mine as we were jumping off a bar when drunk. He said, I bet you couldn't do the airborne course. I went, I bet I could. Of course, the next morning I woke up with a hangover going, what have I committed to? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's what happens when you drink too much, man. I know. So I'm scared of height, speed and height too. I'm a bobsledder, so I'm not sure where the screw went missing.
Yeah, we always do the thing we're scared of, don't we? I just thought, I
You
remember
should.
going out the door thinking, I am going to die. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Check canopy.
That sounds like me. I jumped in Netherhaven
Yes, yes.
for adventure training, and I didn't have to do it as an overseas student, but I begged and begged and begged, and they relented. I broke my ankle on the second jump. Haven't been
Oh,
back since. Learned my lesson, but yeah. So you got through that. You go to your regiment, and you get sent back as a hotshot instructor to now make the lives of officer cadets like myself miserable, and you think you're the man, and then you get an average assessment. And so, as we were talking about that moment of crisis, so it seemed like a real keep on pushing moment, or an opportunity for a keep on pushing moment to me. So talk to me about how you found a way to keep on pushing.
yeah. I think it was Mark Twain that says the two most important days in your life, the day you were born and the day you found out why. And I found out why when Bill White said to me, you have a choice. You can be a victim or you can find inspiring leaders and pay it forward. And so I really, from that point onwards, made a point of really learning about being a good leader and also learning about, I was newly married in my first marriage, which sadly only lasted 23 years. That's a lot of years. I've been remarried for 6 years. But I wasn't getting my marriage right either. So not only was I not getting being an instructor right, I wasn't a very good husband. I didn't understand how to get it right, and we weren't gelling. And so the two of them really sort of, the combined effect really hit me hard. And particularly to try and get on better with my ex-wife at the time, I wanted to learn about human psychology and how people work and to understand people better, emotional intelligence and all those. So I read widely about psychology and why humans do what they do and how to help people and get the best out of people and understand yourself. So the journey really began big time there.
Yeah. So learning, important thing, because a lot of us, we achieve a certain level of success and we kind of think the journey is over.
Mm,
But what you're saying to me is, hey, the journey is never over. There's still a lot more to learn, a lot more growing to
yeah.
do. How have you seen that learning and growing and growth
Yeah.
played out in your life now?
Yeah, it's been fantastic. I think one of the big things is with my wife Lee. We like you've set up a charity, a foundation. We've set up
Hmm.
the Inspiring Leadership Trust for vulnerable girls. Firstly, we began in Kenya, in the slums of Nairobi, with young girls who were 13 and had FGM performed on them and had babies at 13. And so we founded worked with the Hope for Teenage Mothers, set up by a Kenyan woman who Lee interviewed for her book, Inspiring Women Leaders, which is an excellent
Hmm.
book too. And that was a real wake-up call, seeing the conditions that people were in there and the difference it made. Then we went to South Africa, into KwaZulu-Natal, and we set up some microfinance and in the valley of, I don't know, 20,000 Zulus, some 75% unemployment. We built a shipping container, which turned into a computer center and a library, and that made a huge difference. And then back here in this country, in Grimsby, in Liverpool, in Manchester, in London, helping these girls who've gone through abuse and trafficking and mental health issues. And that's my wife, Lee Bowman-Perks, who's done that. But I've been a trustee, and it's made me really think about how lucky I am, and also about paying it forward and sharing with others, and, you know, getting good business leaders to mentor and coach these people, and then finding speakers like you who give back and share with a story to the coaches and the mentors, so they're getting something. It's what I call reciprocity, where everybody gives, everybody gets something. I love that approach.
Yeah. What's in your work with CEOs and other leaders? What would you say is perhaps the one or two biggest challenges that they are struggling with?
Yeah. It's interesting that the higher you get up in an organization, the more you think you know it. And it's quite hard for all of us to unlearn. Like I was on a call with a big company in India, tech company, and I prepared all the slides and I said, this is what I'm going to talk about. Here we are. We're talking about inclusive leadership. And you could see her going, that's not quite. And then my colleague who was on the call too said, no, we'll do something different. And she said, yeah, that sounds much better. And I thought, I've done all that work, but you have to let it go. Just like, because that's your ego. Just let it go. That's not what the client needs. And it's not what they want. And this new thing was much better. I said, that's a good learning. It's a teachable moment. Didn't quite work. What have I learned? What am I going to do differently? And I find this stoic philosophy of controlling the controllables. I can control my thoughts and I can control my actions, but I can't control yours or anybody else's. But my behavior will have a huge impact, and I can control that.
Indeed. I so agree with that. So True North, talk to us about that, man.
Yeah.
How do we find it?
Yeah. Oh, the search for True North. So we when we did our work about what made inspiring leaders, and I brought together the various stories and the experiences that I'd had, we created this compass with a True North, which points towards MQ. They're all quotients, these different 8 elements. You know, the moral quotient, and then your purpose, what gives your life meaning and purpose, your legacy, your health and well-being, your resilience, your brand, your IQ, and your EQ. Those 8 elements. But True North is very interesting because, as you've seen in some of the businesses with, some people have magnetic north. Now, magnetic north moves a small amount each year, and your compass, you have to reset it, as you remember at Santa's, 7 mils a year, grid to mag-add. But you've got to have True North that doesn't change, that people know they can trust you, and they've got psychological safety because you will always consistently behave that way. You won't have favorites and treat them one way and you another, that you will be inclusive and respectful and fair in the way you handle people. And the Romans and the Greeks talked about virtue or character, and that, as Oscar Wilde says, a gentleman or a lady is someone who knows what they will do and what they won't do. So what will you do, and what will you die for? What will you fight for, and what will you let go? Because you can't fight everything. You've got to decide the values and the principles that you'll live by. So I see that as True North, things that are not up for negotiation. And I left a particular organization where I was a managing director because I just found the way it was going didn't align with my values, and I was starting to become a hindrance rather than an asset, because I was grumbling about it and not happy with the way it was going. And that's why I went and set up on my own, which was the best thing, because I'm probably awful to be a follower. I'm a much better leader.
I know your pain, my friend. As you're talking about that, though, Jonathan, that kind of hit me because we're living in a really strange world. Of course, we have COVID-19 going on, which you touched on. And then we have what I call strong-armed leaders, not strong leaders. And it would appear to me that these people don't necessarily have a true north, neither their supporters. And I look back at history, and when we're at Sandhurst, we studied a lot of people, different leaders from around the world, and we would, study about dictators. And I look at some of them, and I wonder, when you look back at history, how could you have a Stalin or a Hitler that was so supported by all these people. And I look around the world today, I'm like, oh, here it is. I'm having all these people who are being the strong arm leaders that are being supported by people around the world. And I guess is that a question of us as individuals not finding or not connecting with our true north as well?
Yeah, I mean, they do say that certainly in politics, and I can't quite see you at the moment, Devon, but I think hopefully you'll be back on screen soon. I find that you get the people you deserve, as they say. And sometimes if you see the awful political leadership in the UK and in America at the moment, and in a number of countries, a number of countries, they could be far better led. And there's this populist, strong arm leadership that's going on, and bullying and appalling behavior and utter lack of integrity, whether it's with prostitutes or Russian backing or whatever it might be. Just like, how can the man be there? You know, you go from someone like Obama, who has very high integrity and is quite a role model and does good to the office of the president. And then you go to someone else who just cuts the corners and goes, no, that's fake news. It's not true. You go.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a real problem. And of course, when I turn to some of the military leaders, and I've been interviewing a few very senior, they'd make very fine leaders of a country, but they don't want the shit that goes with it, and the muckraking over their lives and their families and putting them all through it. So it's got to be certain people who will step forward, but it's not always the finest leaders who become the politicians. Sadly, it's the one who are often quite self-serving and quite self-seeking.
Yeah, and there's another word I'm thinking of, sleazy, but we won't go there. Talk to me, man. And this is perhaps not a fair question, because it's kind of like me asking you to choose which of your 8 kids is your favorite. But being that as it may, perhaps you could touch on 1 or 2, maybe 3 salient points of those quotients, those 8 points on your true north compass.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the one that really hits everybody very hard is PQ, meaning and purpose. What gives your life meaning? Why are you doing what you're doing? And as you know, I'm doing this, and we're on the call, and because I want to inspire leadership, be an inspiring leader, pass forward inspiring leadership tips so others could be better led. I've only got a finite amount of time. I'm 58 years old. I want to live a 100-year life, but my father only lived to 35, so I've already exceeded my quota. So I don't know when my day is going to come, but during the time that I'm there, I want to make a real difference to the lives of as many people as I can. And if I can coach the CEOs and the leaders of the top of the organization, and it filters down this healthy leadership, not toxic leadership, then I feel I've achieved it. So having a clear PQ, sense of meaning and purpose, is one. The second one is EQ, and that's using your emotions intelligently. And IQ is given a lot of credence, and it's important, but it only accounts for 6% of people's performance in a job, whereas EQ accounts for 30%. So it's a really big thing, but many people are just brusque and rude and don't thank people and don't have gratitude. So EQ is very important. And if I was to throw in a bonus one, it would be LQ, leaving a legacy. Do you leave things better than you found them? It's stewardship. You don't own the business. You're looking after it to pass on to the next person. I'm a chairman of a committee, and I'm just passing on to the next person. I found them, I'm encouraging them to take it on, and I'm passing it on to them, hopefully better, certainly better than I found it. And that's what you should do.
Yeah. Do you ever think of your legacy, Jonathan? And if you do, what do you hope it will be?
Yeah, I would like to have touched the lives of as many leaders as possible, that they would be inspiring leaders. And also that through the charity work that we do, that we've given people a chance in life, like I was given a chance, to better their life and make a difference in the world. That's my legacy. And also I'm lucky I've got 2 daughters who are 25 and 26, and a great joy to me. And they're lovely people with good emotional intelligence. They've got good jobs and they're helping others, and they're very much philanthropy, and a stepson and a stepdaughter who I'm also very proud of. So that's part of my legacy, I think.
So before we leave, Jonathan, tell me how, if someone wants some coaching or they want to connect with you for your charity, how would they find you?
Great. LinkedIn, Jonathan Bowman-Perks. If they just come to me there, it'd be lovely to hear from them, and then we can start exchanging emails after that. That'd be the way.
All right, cool. So, we're just touching on American presidents, and the sixth president of the U.S., John Quincy Adams. He said, "If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you are a leader." And that's what your actions are doing, my friend. You are more than a leader. You're an inspiring leader, one who definitely epitomizes this keep on pushing philosophy through the work that you're doing across the board, not just developing yourself as an inspiring leader, but coaching and influencing and inspiring other leaders to become inspiring leaders. And of course, the amazing work that you're doing with your wife, Lee, as well, and touching the lives of others and creating an amazing legacy. So for that, we thank you for your shining example, and we appreciate you spending time with us, sharing your wisdom and your experiences.
Thank you, Devon. It's a pleasure to be on your show, and keep on pushing.
Keep on pushing, my man.